Welcome to Bigger Than the Game with Jeremy and Jose. I'm Jeremy Dove. I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend, my tag team partner, half man, half amazing, Mr. Jose Ruiz. What's going on, man?
What's going on, Jeremy? How you doing, man? How's it going?
It's going good, man. It's going good. We took a week off last week. We did our big rewatch episode with Pete Corrado. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, go to our YouTube channel and check out our 83 finals game 4 rewatch with special guest Pete Corrado. And then we have some changes to the Bigger Than the Game fam that we'll talk about later on. But so we took a week off, so for those people wondering, that's where we were, that's what was going on. But we're back,
Yeah,
and we're coming out swinging, man, with something that is just it's heavy, it's big, it's something that we changed up our whole show schedule because we wanted to talk about it, Jose.
absolutely, man. And if you're a fan of the show, right, we have sat down and done recap episodes on documentaries before, on any movies that we felt were relevant to like us or just society as a whole. We've done a bunch of rewatches and things like that. Obviously, but with games, and our YouTube channel is full of like recaps. We recapped a couple of movies, things like that. But so we were thinking, we were in our production meeting Saturday night, and yeah, we were just eating pizza, hanging out. But we had a conversation about we had an episode we had lined up, and then it was funny, Jeremy. I was telling someone that it was like we were in the middle of doing this, and
Who were you telling?
you're funny, dude.
Go
But
ahead.
yeah, but yeah. So anyway, so we were talking about it, and it was like right in the middle of what we were talking about. We were both like, "Do you want to do this? And you want to do this? How do you feel about it?" And I was like, "Nah, like let's just," we were both like, "No." And then our this episode came up, and as soon as you talked about it, I was 1,000% on board with it. And the reason why is because again, we're going to recap the amazing. I don't even know what adjectives to use for this thing, man. Like the amazing, inspirational, like it was just an amazing documentary. It's called Dear Mama. It's on Hulu. If you have not watched it, it was on FX, but Hulu is also streaming it as well. Um, it was an amazing documentary based off, like obviously the song Dear Mama is the name of it, but from Tupac Shakur and then Afeni Shakur, like their backstories. And I've been telling people about that, Jeremy. Like I'm telling so many people about this documentary, but
Hmm.
what I'm telling people, because I know you knew, Jeremy. I knew a lot of her backstory, but a lot of people did not, and that's why, like, that's how I'm hyping it up. It's like, you think you may know his backstory, you think that backstory is amazing, but wait till you hear her backstory. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's just, it's an amazing job, and it's one of the. I'll get into how I feel about it, but I'll let you jump in, Jeremy. But yeah, we're
Well,
doing
I
Dear
think
Mama
the
tonight.
the yeah, we're doing Dear Mama, the saga of Afeni and Tupac Shakur, and I'm not going to lie, it was we did an episode on Tupac. Check the archives.
Check
Um,
them.
back in 2021, for the 25th anniversary of his death.
Wow, it's
And
2021 we did that.
yeah, that was 2021, September of 2021.
Yeah.
So it was something that and the thing is, there's so much about Tupac. And not that he doesn't, I never felt for one second like he's a controversial figure. He's a legend. He's an icon. So it's like, of course, there's a lot. But sometimes, even if you're like into a topic or a subject, you can be like, how else are you going to tell this story? How else
Yeah.
are you going to do this? And I'm not going to lie, Jose, when I heard things about this months ago, but when I saw the first trailer for it back in April, I was like, all right, it does look pretty good. So I was kind of like, I'll give it a try. Like, I'll see what it's like that first episode, and we'll see from there. Maybe to see if the culture's talking about it, I'll keep up with it, whatever. And boom, right out the gate. And you were talking about the words to describe it, and to me, the thing I would say it's maybe easy but powerful. This is
Yeah.
just
Yes.
something that's
Yes.
just so powerful, and there's nothing about it from the beginning of episode 1 to the end of episode 5, because it's a 5 episode docu series. It's powerful. The emotions are swirling inside you, start to finish. And I like something like that. That like some people may not, but I love something that has you like riveted the whole time, and you're feeling all kinds of emotions. And the thing is, at least for Tupac, we know his story. Now you're right. You and I knew about Afeni Shakur, but some people I think don't know. A lot of people won't know her story fully. Like
Right.
this will help it, but it's something that was just so powerful, and something that when I would watch it over the weekend because chopping on Friday, it would stick with me. And especially this last episode when I saw you that night for our production meeting, I couldn't get out of my mind all day. It was just racing through what I had just seen, and that's when you know you have a real, to me, I'll say it, a masterpiece when it comes to art. When you people can't stop talking about it, thinking about it, it stays right at the front of their mind, and that's what this docu series did for me. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. I think for you too.
It did. No, it did. And masterpiece is a right way to put it. Powerful is another great adjective to use for it because it definitely was. Because I've seen countless documentaries about, like West Coast, East Coast, West Coast rival, like all that beef, Biggie and Tupac. There's like
Right.
Showtime episodes for that. Like I watched Showtime has a great documentary on Suge Knight. Like that was really good. Like I've watched
Mm-hmm.
countless documentaries on what happened in this situation, right? So in my mind, and I think you were talking about it a little bit too there. I mean, where it was like, here's another one. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I wasn't as excited, and I remember you would like reaching out to me and telling me this was coming, and I was just like, okay, I'll check it out, and then, but when I heard you, the way you were talking about it, I knew it was different, and then when I started watching it, and the great thing is, it wasn't just about, you know, like him signing with Death Row, and that didn't come till later on in this documentary because that is an important part of his life, right? Like it has to be talked about and documented. But the thing that really got me, and you had told me this as well, Jeremy, where the way the thing started, you know what I mean? Like just from the intro, like, and I don't even mean like the music or anything like that. Like the music was great, obviously, soundtrack was great, but the way this episode one started, it was just it just got you right from the jump. But what intrigued me the most was hearing about her, Afeni Shakur, his mother, and her life and how she came up, and it was just so well done, and it was again masterpiece, perfect way to say it.
And the thing is, you know, since Tupac's death, he's been dissected, broken down in hip hop culture and pop culture and academic world, right? Social academic. And I think rightfully so. But Jose, the whole time that I was watching all five of these episodes, I was like, she needs a class on her. Colleges, he'd be talking about her. I mean, you can do it like with Tupac, but I'm like, by herself, we need courses and classes about Afeni Shakur because just how amazing and real and powerful of a woman that she was. And I'm like, from every stage, from her growing up to joining the Panthers, to being a mother to Tupac, to the addiction, to how she handled Tupac's death and what she did to keep his legacy alive, those 20 years afterwards, it's just something that, like, man, credit to Alan Hughes. And we'll get into it how this could not have been easy for him on so
Right.
many levels. But the fact that he did this, and I thought when he did the Defiant ones about Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine back in 2017, I was like, man, this is incredible. Like, it's gonna be top for you to. It's gonna be hard for you to top this, but he did. He took on a bigger project, a harder project, in my opinion, and nailed it. And I'm just in awe of him and everyone who was a part of this, like behind the scenes, because they just hit it out the park.
Yeah, Hughes brothers were great. I mean, Alan Hughes did this one, but Hughes brothers overall, I remember, again, Menace to Society, stuff like that, which should get talked about. We'll talk about it when it comes to with these episodes as well, because that's a piece of this too, and a piece of this story. So, Menace to Society was one of my favorite movies. So that should tell you a lot about no, I wasn't as a kid, but no, he Alan Hughes, man, like he hit a home run here, like a grand slam, and again, like the production of it, was amazing. I know we were talking about that, like, the soundtrack and the music that was involved in it was amazing. And it wasn't just Tupac stuff. Like, it was just a bunch of different music just for, again, like he was setting the, like the time and doing all that. But even the Tupac music that he had was versions that I've never heard. It
Yeah.
was like some acapella stuff, like, and it just, the way he did it, it just really hits you hard. Like in the moment of like where the documentary was or where the episode was, you would hear his music come on, and again, no beat or anything like that, and it's just him describing something, and then somebody else talking about it in the background. It was just, oh man, like it was so good.
And what I loved about that, when you bring up like him, like kind of like, I don't know the right word, I'm gonna say it, like isolating like a Tupac lyric of a song with no beat. Um, it was about a certain social topic,
Yes.
and then there was a lot of times, because a lot of times I feel like in all music, right? An artist could be like conveying like some deep message, but we hear the beat and we hear a chorus and we lose that message. I think of like, hell, even Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA, and all these like fake ass politicians always were like bumping it. So I thought it was just like a right on USA until like you sat there and listened and someone's like, this is about a Vietnam vet who comes home and he's getting screwed and America like turns his back on. And it's like, damn. And I'm like, I don't think these politicians would be playing this song
Yeah.
if they knew what it meant. And I think a lot of times we can get mixed up and lose that, even people with Tupac. So I feel like it forced you to be like, even if you knew his music, to be like, damn, what this dude was saying would be great and powerful, these lyrics in 2023, let alone in 91, 92, 93. Who was doing what he was doing at that point. And I think that's why it was just a great like production decision, director's move to be like, listen to the lyrics, when like listen to what he's saying, focus on that and how deep this brother was.
Right. And then and it wasn't even like music that was put out. It was just videos. He had such great footage of Tupac when he was younger, and like talent shows, and just all different stuff that I had never seen before. And there was this one clip. I think it was in episode 1, where again, we can get into this episode soon, but it was just like, obviously the first episode is going to, they're going to talk about each individual, and then how they came up, and how they rose to wherever they rose to. And one part of it was, he was like at a talent show, and he was freestyling to like an R&B Rakim like beat, and
Mm-hmm.
it was so good. And he was like 16. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, man, like this dude was amazing. I mean, obviously I knew how great of an artist he is and stuff like that, but even when we did our Tupac episode, I mentioned, I wasn't like, I loved his music. Don't get me wrong. Like, I love certain songs. I there are moments in my life where his music was a big part of that, and but I wouldn't sit here and tell you I was his biggest fan. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had other artists that I really thought more highly of, and I was a prisoner of the moment, right? When they were talking about this, like the media was really pushing like this East Coast versus West Coast. I was like, oh, I'm East Coast, like, I was all about
Right,
that,
right.
and I was listening to Biggie and Wu Tang and Nas, Jay Z, like all these other artists before I was even like trying to venture out to what other people were doing. So, but the older I've gotten, the more deeper I've gotten into his music, and the more I've really learned to love it. And but this documentary did heighten that times 10 probably for me. So it was
No.
great.
And I think for me, the best movies, the best books, podcasts, whatever you want to say, is when it hits on so many issues and topics that we could sit 10 people down and being like, what's the first thing? What's the first theme or message of this movie or of this book? And 10 people could give you 10 different answers and they all be right. And you'd be like, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. I look at this documentary, you're looking at from mother son relationships to race to capitalism to police brutality and social issues, to addiction, to mental health, generational trauma. All these things to me were hitting you right in the face to, women's rights and what's going on with that, to the mother and son, but the black mother and the black son and that relationship, and what the FBI and the government and conspiracy and real, not even conspiracy, real shit that
Facts.
the government was doing.
Yes.
And and how that, and trying to divide, and the fact that they did it with this mother, with Afeni, and then let's be real, did the same stuff with Tupac, and we can get into that, and how they were targeting him and looking at, hey, they don't want another black messiah. And when you look at that, and they were talking about that part of the episode was about Afeni joining the Black Panthers, and then the counter pro, what the J. Edgar Hoover and FBI were doing,
yes,
and all those things. And that Black Messiah, though, you can fast forward, that was Tupac they were looking at too, like that. But they were talking about after Malcolm X was assassinated that they didn't want another Black Messiah, so doing things to take down the Black Panther and take down strong black men. And you fast forward 20 years later, that was happening to Tupac Shakur. So all those things you can jump at and look at and just dissect, and being like, oh, that's what hit you first? Yeah, I can see why that would hit you first. This is what hit me first. And that's where I think everyone should watch this. Any and everyone should. You don't have to be a hip-hop fan,
right,
a Tupac fan. And I think, honestly, if you were someone from back then who were just like, I don't want to hear that music, someone now who's younger, I think everyone knows who Tupac is. I think there's no way, to me, you can't watch this and not gain more empathy and more respect for him.
Oh my God, there's no way you that doesn't happen. Seriously. And again, I know his music. I know his music, right? I've listened to it throughout my life, and this documentary has made me like, wow, like this dude was so much deeper than I even, first of all, that I can even understand back in like 96, 94, 93. Like, I remember like, as a kid, that, the Digital Underground song when he first came on, that's when I first heard of him. And I was like,
same song.
Yeah, same song. And I was like, who the hell is this dude? But that's like, at that point in time, I couldn't get that. Like, it was just like, it was like party music, and that's what they were all about. But, when he started like going out on his own, and like Brenda's Got a Baby, and like I remember that, and I was like, man, like that's deep. Like, what I loved about this documentary, man, like I'll start right early on. It's like how it allowed him, well, not allowed him personally, obviously, because he's no longer with us, but like how it showed how he would talk about in his music, like it wasn't all about thug life, right? It wasn't like, he was definitely talking about stuff that rappers or hip hop artists were afraid to touch, and showing like emotion, and showing, like care for women, and showing like care for children and all that. Like, he was not afraid to do any of that. And again, some of his best music was because of that. And again, I just think of like Brenda's Got a Baby, and they talked about that in this episode, and in the second episode, excuse me. And it was just like how deep that was, and the meaning behind it. Because that's the thing too, what this did for me. And you talked about like the first thing that it did, and I wanted to ask you that question. But for me, it just kind of like, it made a lot of sense. His music made a lot of sense to me. You know what I'm saying? Like I understood his music. I got 100%. Brenda's Got a Baby, I fully understood that song. You know what I mean? Like, but a lot of his other music, it made sense, like why he was writing songs about what he was writing songs about. So what was the first thing, Jeremy, for you that episode 1 hit you with, where it was just like, oh shit, like I'm locked in. It's got his hooks in me. What was the first thing with episode 1?
Oh, it was the beginning of episode 1, and I think every episode does this, but I think for anyone, it's that opening scene. And I knew about, like, that's what's interesting, like, and fascinating. Like, about it, but you hadn't heard like the detail, the stories, but about when, that Halloween night, 93. And, when I had heard about, I knew that, yeah, he had shot a couple undercover, or like they were off-duty cops.
Off-duty,
he shot them, like, in Atlanta. And I remember hearing that and being like, yeah. And like, I feel like no one talked about that, because there's so much to talk about with Tupac. That's a story that gets like not talked about. And so for them to say that, and it's the way it was, and it was like, they're driving by and they see these two guys like getting in the face of this black guy, and they were like, "What's going on?" And it seemed like it was okay, and then those two guys like hit the black dude, and Tupac, that was him. He felt that was his birthright, honestly, to protect black people.
Yeah.
So then to go in there and then try to break it up, and then they smash like the car window, and then they take off running, and he says, grab my gun," and then to have it where you'll see if you haven't watched it, like Alan Hughes has a couple of his cousins. They're not together, but they're telling the same story, and he's
same exact
back and
story.
forth.
Same exact story.
And been like he said, give me my gun, and no one gave him the gun, and then he goes and runs around and grabs it, and then he was a marksman, which we'll talk about. What I didn't know was how good he was, for better and for worse, with the gun, for get on one knee, which I like. I don't like it because, like, I'm not saying like promote gunplay at all, but then sometimes I do when I hear people talk and they're like waving a gun around. I'm like, that's not how like it'll blow your ass back if you do. You can't shoot like that, like the movie. So then Ben, like, and that made me think like, yeah, this is really what happened. But him to get on one knee and he shot them, like, and it was like, damn. And then the capper was him being like, whatever, and let's go to the party we were going to, and then he plays Dear Mama for them while the cops are out looking for him, and they were like, his cousins were like, this is a different dude, and I'm like, and it just, that's how it opens, and I'm like, yeah, that, I was hooked. I popped up, I was in the bed watching it, I popped up, and I was like, sometimes you play something early in the morning, he's like, you fall asleep. I wasn't going back to sleep after that. I was hooked.
Yeah, that was the way they told that story. Because again, you mentioned it there. I mean, like, I've heard that story before, and I didn't. But the context of it was, oh, okay, like, you know what I'm saying. Like, again, I don't think someone deserves to be shot because they punched somebody or whatever the case. But even like before that even happened, they were at a party and they were arguing with security, and that had them like all ready to go. Like, you know what I'm saying. Like, so they all leave this event. I think he was like performing there or something like that. I don't know what he's actually doing, but they leave, and that's when they see that scene. And again, like, the off duty cop is the one that pulled the gun out first. You know what I'm saying? Like, so they're arguing with this individual. The two white off duty officers are arguing with this African American guy. Again, the guy punches them. One of the off duty cops pulls out the gun on them and tells them to leave, and then, like you mentioned, breaks the window, and that's when everything went off too. And again, it's not like they were driving by, he jumps out and just starts shooting. Like, there's a lot more context to it than what I heard before, and I agree. Like, that story alone would have been like a good like intro, the way they were doing it. And it's his one cousin was funny. He was like, yeah, the one guy pushed him, the other guy pushed him. It was kind of corny.
Yeah.
But he was like, that's how Pac was. And I was like, that was funny, because it probably wasn't a big deal until the dude pulls out a gun on you, and so yeah, and I agree. Like, the capper, like, was when he went back to the hotel, played Dear Mama, cops outside the door, and he's just kind of sitting there smoking weed and listening, and man, like, that is a different type of dude.
And that's the thing, like, and it's just I remember listening to Alan Hughes recently on like an interview, and him talking about like Tupac just ran into the fire. He's like with no armor, just butt ass naked. Tupac would just jump into fire. He's running into the fires, and that's where, like, I'm not saying I've never met anyone like Tupac. I'm not going to claim, but like, I think you probably have. We met people like that, and it's like, if I'm completely 100% honest, it's part like scary, it's part like you think you're stupid, and then also though there's part of it where you admire that and you wish you had that to like more at times, and that's what I felt with everything. Like, watching this, I felt all those. I was like, yo, like, I will hear something that I've known before, being like, yo, that's stupid, or yo, that's crazy, or you know what, yo, that takes balls, and I admire that about. Like, you feel that way with people like that. They're going to jump in, no question that they see something, they just go. They're not thinking about the consequences or the future, and they just go, and it's all those things.
Yeah, no, it was a great intro, great opening scene. Because again, like, you get the credits, then you get Dear Mama, the song, and then boom, they jump right into this story. But with me, there, I mean, like the, that obviously got me right, like that. Immediately, I was hooked right after that too. But I'll go with a different, right, a different example since you know you already used that. But to me, was the one person, and I know we're going to get into this later on. Like, I don't want to call them winners and losers, but people
Who
that
stole the
we
show in the
right,
documentary?
right. So for me, Afeni Shakur's sister, Glow, like she's the one for me that had me almost in like in a trance. It's weird, and because the way she would tell these stories and the way she would speaking and it when she started talking when she jumped on for the first time and when she was saying like Pac was like a myth builder and a fantasy writer, I was like, what is she talking, like I knew what she meant, but it was just like, wow, like that's pretty cool, like that's pretty deep. And she just starts going in and starts talking about Afeni Shakur, and she does an amazing job like explaining what type of person she was and all that. She hooked me like immediately too, like just listening to her, because again, if you haven't watched it, she's interviewed a lot, and her interviews are shown a lot in every episode for the most part, and probably the most out of anyone.
I'll say this, Jose. I don't mind getting into it now. She is the MVP of this movie,
Mine too, yeah.
and I'll be honest. If she's not in it, say all that, it's a really good documentary or docuseries. If
Right.
she's not in it at all, or you just see like old clips, she takes it from really good to greatness.
Yep. I agree.
And you felt the passion, you felt the burden. I don't know if it was a burden. Actually, no. I'll say this: like everything's contradiction. It was the burden, but the joy of telling her sister and nephew. Because, like she said in episode 5, she only had one sister and one nephew in this lifetime, and she wanted to tell their story, to tell her little sister's story, to tell her nephew's story, and you felt like, yeah, this mattered to tell her family's story. And I tell you what had me, I'm not going to lie, it had me in tears, was at the end when she's talking to Alan Hughes and she was talking about like her sister, like even after his death. And he's like, did she ever find peace? And he was like, she never
Dude,
had peace of mind.
that got me too. Yeah.
And I was like, she never had. And then she's talking, and then she was a rock. I mean, this is a black woman who done been through some shit in her life, right? But she was a rock. And at the end, where she's like, I'm just gonna say this, and I'm about to cry. And then she's like, I had to tell this story because Afeni wanted this story told. And she's talking, and she has a little bit of tears. But then at the end, her and Alan Hughes hugged. And I've
Yeah.
never felt this way before, Jose. Where if I could, this may sound real weird, if I could have gone through the screen and gave her a hug,
Yeah.
I would have done it because I would have been like, you did them so proud,
Right.
and you told this story so well, and you take a bow to no one. And I just like, if I ever see that lady, like, if I never will probably, but if I did, and I'm not someone who goes up to people and talks to them, like, and she's
Yeah.
not
I'm
even
not.
like famous,
Right.
right? But I gotta say something to this woman. I gotta talk to her, like, because she just did an incredible job.
She did, and she reeled me right in, and I agree with that. And then she talks about it at the beginning, like she mentions it in the beginning, but they go really deep at episode 5 about it, and like she wanted to tell her story, the good and the bad. She made
Mm-hmm.
sure like that was mentioned, and she was funny because she was like, "I'll tell you what, she got on my nerves," and she was like, and "Guess what? She would leave out talk shit behind her back." Like
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
that was great, man. But she just she did an amazing job, and you're right, she did them proud because she was again, she knocked it out of the park. And so that's for me was right at the beginning. I was like, who is this? What is she like? Because I'm all about her right now.
Yeah. And I'll say for me, a scene stealer that I got to look at. Episode 2 had a lot of scene stealers. Um, I got to look at when Tupac was at. I feel like this like Malcolm X Expo, and he comes in, and his publicist is like, "That's when I saw the Black Panther come out in him." So he gets up and starts talking, and he says some
Oh,
curses.
dude,
And the
that was
lady,
great.
I love that they zoom in. You see her go, "Watch your language." And he goes, "I apologize. I apologize for cursing." But this shit, he starts cursing right away. And then
Cursing more.
yeah, and then he goes, "They say to calm down. Fuck that." And he starts going even in more, and I was like, "Whoa!" I never seen that clip. I think I might have seen bits, but I never seen it like that full on. And
Yeah.
for him to just go in like that, and then that dude in Digital Underground said, "When you said to calm down, that's the worst words to say to Tupac." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know people like that. When you tell them to be calm, that's just lighting, putting gasoline on a fire. It's going to rev them up even more." And it was like, yeah, you could see him just getting passionate. But the thing is, what he was saying in that message too
It's 100% spot
was
on,
the
man.
battle that we have today generationally in the black community of those who were born of an older generation, and you know what, the methods that they used for that time for Jim Crow to help with civil rights. It's like, hey, you give homage and respect to, but it's a different world. And I look back on it and I think what was a missing piece when I look at like the 80s, the 90s, and that's where Tupac's talking about is those fighters who were fighting that struggle in the civil rights era. And maybe I don't want to say took the foot off the gas because maybe they were burned out, they were tired. There's a lot of
Right.
battle scars. But then when you look back, that's what happened in the 80s and 90s. Things got forgotten, and things that were in your face / things that were underneath the surface were happening that were being done systemically. And it goes into what we're seeing now. And it's like there's a big gap of this fight that I feel like there were people out there trying, but it was left out. And that's what Tupac's saying in that part, though. He was like, you guys, like, they took away all like the Black Panthers, like they're in jail, they were killed, and then we're left with nothing. And now you older people are saying, be calm, be quiet. And he's like, hell no. No one taught me how to be a man. My mom got put in jail for this. And guess what? Who am I learning from? The dudes on the streets. So he's like, don't get upset when all this blows up, because if you ain't putting nothing into it, I don't want to hear nothing about it. And that scene's it's a little bit funny, but then it gets like powerful all like in a split second.
No, it's extremely powerful because they also at towards the end of episode 1, again, because the 80s and 90s, what we think about when we think about inner cities and things like that, the crack epidemic, right? Like that's the first thing that comes to my mind anyway. When
Yeah.
I think about where I grew up and what it was like then, and so they did a good job and like interviewing like him, well, not him, but like showing interviews of him and his friends and stuff like that. And when they were talking about like this, they was my generation and 100% the generation after mine were raised like in this era. You know what I mean? Like our generations, right? Like we were raised in this like late 80s, early 90s, like. And I know like the crack epidemic was really like mid 80s and stuff like that, but towards like the end of it, man, it was brutal, man, for like a lot of kids out there and stuff like that, where their parents were in the, if not using drugs, selling it, like, you know what I'm saying, like, and they had no role models, and guess what, they were each other's role models. And I grew up in a rough neighborhood, Jeremy, man. I know where you grew up at. You told me, and it was rough too. And like I understood what he was talking about. You know what I mean? Like I understood what they were all talking about, and it's just like, yeah, like, you know, role models for kids in those areas become what? Like not dad who's maybe not even around. You know what I mean? Like, or mom struggling and making a little bit of money that she's making. No, it's the guys who are pulling up in these nice cars, and they're doing this and they're doing that, and they see you in a store and they're like, hey, little man, take these $10 and go buy yourself something to eat or whatever. Like, how do you forget that when you don't have that? You know what I'm saying? Like, or you see a friend of yours or like an older brother, like your friend's older brother. One day he's just as poor as you, and then 4 months later he's driving around and doing all this stuff. Because why?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's in the game, right? He's doing all this stuff, and that's who you have no choice but to look up to, right? And then and now this is a whole generation that grows up like that. So now that generation, our generation, we're the adults now. You know what I mean? Like, so that's what we knew. And then now a lot of these kids, and especially like generations ago, are now like late teens and they're a mess. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you see what's going on, why this world is this country is the way it is, because again, like this is the generation that kind of started that almost. You know what I mean? Like he was speaking directly to them, and I love how you talked about like that Black Panther movement and stuff like that, and like how towards when this interview was going on, well not interview, when this video was what they were showing, you're right. Like most of them were in jail, dead, you know, and at this point, whoever was left over, if they weren't afflicted with drugs, you know, they were just done. You know what I'm saying? Like they had no energy, and they were older too. You know what I'm saying? Like
Mm-hmm.
it was up to like that generation to kind of move it on, and that's what he wanted to do. But he was meeting a lot of resistance.
And I think, and the thing is, and that's the balance that I feel like I'll be honest, I have when I talk to people in my own community. It's like, oh, so much respect, but then it's like, don't give the dis. We're out here fighting. Are we making mistakes? Absolutely, we will. We're human. We're going to make mistakes with it.
Right.
But it's like we still have the same problems. They may a lot of times they're not resurfacing. There's just more cameras. Like it's the same way it was back then, the way it is now. In
Right.
other ways, it's different. It's just masked differently, but the same issues are here. So it's like, don't say to go back to do what was done in the '60s or the '70s, because guess what? It's a new time. It's a new era. It's a new day. Can we learn from y'all? Absolutely, and we should learn. But don't disrespect that. You know what? Y'all went through battles that we haven't gone through, but we're going through battles that you have no idea what we're going through either, and have respect and understanding for that, not judgment and looking down and, oh, back in my day, or what's wrong with y'all. You damn well should know what's wrong with us, and
Yeah.
that's what he was putting out there with it, and that's what I appreciate. um it just it hit on so many levels, and to me, what I'll give Alan Hughes credit for also came up in episode 2. And Jose, the whole time I was thinking this, right? Like episode 1, when I see directed by Alan Hughes, and I'm just like, wait a minute. I go, I know this is the Alan Hughes who got his ass whooped by Tupac. And he's doing, and so I was like, he's doing I go, is he going to talk about this? Because this got to be weird as hell. And for him to actually
Yeah.
sit down and be a interview piece, and then the showing like all like the other people he was interviewing being like, you want to talk about it? Like I was ready for it. And I give him credit
Yeah.
for he dove into it, and that's got to be hard to do. And that to me is where I was like, you got a lot of balls, man, for the world to see. You're processing that you're doing this documentary on this dude who you were close with, and then it went south real fast and real bad, and his mother, and you're talking about his legacy, and how do you talk about this incident that happened, which is a big part of his legacy
Yes.
and a big part of Alan Hughes' legacy, and he did a good job to me of being real about both parts.
Admittingly saying that he started doing this documentary or docuseries, that he figured out that he still hasn't even processed all of that yet. So to even say that in there, he gained a lot of respect from me there, because again, like he could have done this, and in my mind, like if he doesn't say that, I'm like, all right, well, he probably was over it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he was just like, you know what, I'm just going to do this. It's a great story, like whatever. But for him to even say that, I was like, man, and this was a long time ago. You're talking about Menace to Society. That was what, 93, 92, something like that when that happened. And that's when it was released. They were filming this, and that's when that happened. So for context, if folks don't understand, like, you know, if you haven't seen Menace to Society, it's an amazing movie. You need to watch that. But in the movie, there's a group of guys who grew up together, whatever, and then one of the guys, I'm trying to remember, right? He needs to go to jail. Yeah, he goes to jail or something like that happens, and he becomes Muslim, and he gets out, and he's
non-violent Muslim,
non-violent, and is trying to like educate all his friends and like stopping them from drinking all the time and stuff like that. Sharif was the guy's name. I don't know the actor's name, but
I don't know either.
he did a great job. Like he really did a great job there, and but that role was supposed to go to Tupac, and and then it just made me think again. Like I knew this like story before as well, but I just can't imagine like him in that role. I think he would have been. I think he elevates that movie as well. Like he gives it a bigger name because there was a lot of people in there. Lawrence Tate was in that, and but he was really young. That might have been his big first movie, and but there was like an issue. And again, Jeremy, you might jump in here and tell the story a little better than me, but um, there was like friction in regards to like the character, and then they just get into this big argument, fight happens. The funny part was, and Snoop Dogg was even laughing at it too, but he was like, he didn't beat me up. It was 10 of his friends that beat me up. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh shit. Like, man, but yeah, if I know I'm missing a lot of stuff out of that story, Jeremy. So if you
No,
want to
no,
like kind of add
yeah,
to it, feel
it
free.
was more of, and I think Alan Hughes kind of said it where he was like he understood where like Tupac wanted that character rewritten. I don't think Tupac did not feel he connected with that, and because he said I heard Tupac say in an interview like that character's not real, and I don't agree with that. I know I've
I
met
don't either.
plenty of people who went to jail and come out and they're like that. They found religion, whatever the faith is, and then they're talking very peace, don't do this, don't do
Right.
that, and they're kind of like could be preachy. It comes across as preachy to other people who are like, I knew you before and you wouldn't like this. What are you doing? So like I've met plenty of people like that. So that's why like I do disagree with Tupac on that part, but I think he wanted it written like to reflect how he felt. And Alan Hughes said, looking back, he understands that, but Tupac was going through a lot, and I think that's just and it's so hard because I think, man, like we could do like a 5 hour. We're not going to do 5 hour people, so
Yeah.
don't get
Yeah.
worried. But like, it's like what had been happening to Tupac in his reality. Like not even we can definitely look at like what growing up, but just even him getting harassed and the police brutality with the cops and him, being blamed when that young guy killed a cop and was like he was playing Tupac's song about the police and just the way like Tupac felt like people were coming for him, like he was kind of changing and being more difficult. And Alan Hughes was like, me and my brother were like, he's just not listening. He's erratic. And so we kind of were like, nah, we're not rewriting the role. And Tupac's like, oh, real? Well, fuck you. And it was fuck you. And then it was just like,
Then,
Tupac was
then
like,
10 guys jumped on him.
yeah, yeah. 10 guys jumped him. And Alan Hughes got jumped. He got jumped bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
He got jumped bad. And Tupac went to court for it. Tupac did a little time for it, honestly. Tupac on Yo MTV Raps uh, gets himself like he pretty much like gets found guilty. Like they played
They
that clip,
perjured him. He perjured himself.
yeah, on Yo MTV Raps during his trial of him talking about beating up the Hughes brothers. And people have seen that clip a million times where Ed Lover is trying to cover his mouth because Tupac's talking, and it's like that's just how crazy and hyped up his life was, and he was going a million miles an hour, like mentally and physically.
Yeah.
Like he does that, and then they wind up bringing that into the court, to the trial, and then that's what gets him convicted. He has a little time for it. So I can guarantee Alan Hughes probably feels guilty about that in a way because it's like, especially about what happens later on. Like, I think he wanted justice. I don't know if he wanted him to go to jail. Like, as someone, because they were tight and they did him his first music videos. So it's just like, I give him credit for opening up that wound and sharing that with people and still taking this project on and taking it on honestly and wanting to do a Feeney right, to do Tupac right, to do Glow right, everybody to tell this story the right way.
Yeah. No,
Because I couldn't do it.
I'd had a tough. I couldn't do it either. I'll be honest, because again, and he was still processing that, and yeah, again, he got a lot. Not that he needs this to like live his life, but he gained a lot of my respect, right? And I can appreciate him doing such a great job with this. Um, Still like figuring all that part out, because again, like you said, he got beat bad, and again, it's not like it was a little fight that he might have lost the fight. He was injured, man, and again, that does take years and years to get over for some people, for a lot of people, for most people probably,
Yeah.
so definitely give him a lot of credit. Another part of that episode where I can't remember if I knew this. I couldn't remember, but when I heard it, I was like, I thought it was like really interesting. Where again, Brenda's Got a Baby song was a real like life like event. Like I didn't know. I don't think that was. I don't know if I remember that, But they were talking about he read it in the paper, and and that kind of gave him the idea of the song, right? And that kind of like took me back. I was like, wow, like I didn't know that was like a real situation. I don't know. Did you? You probably already knew that, Jeremy, but I didn't know that.
Yeah, I knew it. My uncle who's passed away was out in California around like the same time as Tupac, and he actually had a picture like, which was like, wow, it was true, like that he like knew Tupac a little bit, like before, and so he's the one. When I was younger, he told me about that story and that like yeah, like that was real, and so that I knew as a young kid, because the Tupac, you're a little older than I am. I got the Brenda's Got a Baby Tupac later. The Tupac, Death Row Tupac are in my brain. Like that, all that is my memories. Like,
Yeah,
so I knew the East Coast, West Coast, him and Biggie beef. Like, I mean, I heard California when I was young, California Love so much. I was like, turn it off. Like, which now I feel bad because it's the classic, but it got played all the time back then. Like, it was just everywhere. So, like, that's the guy I knew. I didn't know the political social activists until like a little bit later on, and being told by people, who were into it, older people like in my family, older friends of family, telling me about what Tupac was saying. And so Brenda's Got a Baby was a huge deal in the community and a huge game changer for hip hop. And I
yes.
think if you hear it, it's like not it's like it's kind of sounds a little corny, like the beat and everything. It's not one of my favorite songs, like just flat out the song, but it is important that like I love how they said you weren't hearing songs like
It
that
was totally different. Yeah.
in hip hop. Like and you had like social active, you had like Public Enemy, Fight the Power in different songs, which I give Chuck D and them so much credit. But a song like this that like tug at your heartstrings, that wasn't really going on in hip hop back in '91.
Right. No, it was not at all. Not that I can remember anyway. And again, I was really young too at this time, but I knew that song was different. You know what I'm saying? Like, and we referenced this song in the video in particular. Video was great, and when we did our episode about Tupac, and he had the UNLV stuff on. It was like a black and white, like video, but that red kind of like stuck out, and it was just it was something very different. But then also my early memories of Tupac was Brenda's Got a Baby, and then Bishop. You know what I'm saying? And in the movie, and that's where it just like for me, I was like, who the hell is this guy? Like, you know what I'm saying? And Juice, and and that soundtrack was a great soundtrack, by the way, if you haven't listened to that. But yeah, it was just like at this time, just kind of like giving more context on like why what happened within this Menace to Society, like, you know, with him and Alan Hughes, like what happened on that set and all that, why that was such a big deal. Because like you mentioned, like he was just going through a whole lot, and he was still, and then the thing is, he was just starting to become like really known. You know what I mean? Like, and for that to happen, it was just definitely like taking a step back.
And I want to ask you this question, and for those listening, we're going to get into Afeni Shakur. I don't want people thinking there's a lot to talk about just her individually, but I just want to, before we get to her too, I want to ask this question because you brought up Juice, and I'm glad you did. So throughout like the series, like you get like because Tupac was an incredible actor, and you see that he went to the Baltimore performing arts school,
Yes.
and he was studying to be a great actor too. That's kind of like to me like the first craft he had was acting. But one thing you get is that I've heard this before, But then this kind of was showing it throughout. Where you look at episode one, and I've seen that clip of him when he has like that fade. He's like being interviewed like on a porch, and he's like in high school and talking about like different social issues and how like nice he is, and he's like, man, these guys call women the B word. Like I
I
couldn't,
know.
and then to see how he changed, and a lot of times it was he didn't have the father figure. His mom was battling addiction, so he was just kind of copying people. And they talked about like from as a he started watching the older guys talk to girls, and he took that persona on. He started, he was in Juice, and then he kind of became more like Bishop, and then he kind of kept doing these things. He kept then he goes to Death Row. He starts acting like the gangbangers and stuff. How much do you think was Tupac a guy who kind of like I know he was real and authentic, but like he mimicked people. He kind of went around mimicking, like he was like a method actor all the time in a way, kind of. I don't know what you think about that, but that's what stood out to me a little bit.
Yeah, no, I get that. And Tyson in episode 5 put it in a great way where he was describing, when Tyson was talking about him being in jail, like himself being in jail, and how he like flourished in there and loved it. And he mentioned he's like he said he felt like Tupac was a good kid. You know what I mean? Like, and I totally relate to that. You know what I'm saying? Like I 100% can relate to that. And but to your point there, I feel not just him. I feel like a lot of kids and a lot of people who grow up in like the inner cities really have a tough time with this. And I had a tough time with this, where it's like you you can't be your real self. You know what I mean? Like you have to hide like emotions. To me, looking at this documentary series, like he was a very emotional guy. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, but you can't go, and I use this analogy a lot. Like I couldn't walk like out of my mom's house and walk to the corner and tell my friends like, "Hey, I have a lot of anxiety today." Like, you know what I'm saying? Like you just could not do that. And I feel like when you're raised like that from a very young age, like you have to like hide emotions. You have to, be very weary of like, you know, showing weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Like I feel like you learn, you become a chameleon. You know what I'm saying? Like
Mm-hmm.
you very much do. And I feel like you get put in certain situations or different situations, and you just learn how to adapt in those situations, and like kind of like so people can like you. You know what I mean? Like I'm telling you, because I'm speaking from experience, man. Like you could have put me in any situation in life. You want to, I can hang out with the quote unquote the jocks, and we could talk about sports and we could play sports, and I was able to do all of that stuff. You can put me in a on the steps with like 6 or 7 girls, and guess what? I'm going to hang out with them and talk to them and do whatever I'm going to do there. But you could put me with my friends, and I'm going to be like a specific way. Like there's only like a handful of people that really I can say really, really, really know exactly who I am. Like no matter what. But when I feel like in like that, like to answer your question, also like it's like watching this, it's like I got the same thing I like from him, from not having someone to go to, and a father figure or like an older brother even. You know what I'm saying? Like to go to where you can ask questions and stuff. He had his mom. Like he would call his mom and it's like, oh, I was on a date with this person. Like, like that. Not that that's not good, because that's an amazing relationship, but that's what I get from that. You know what I'm saying, Jeremy? Like that's what I get, where he's always searching. You know what I mean? Like always searching for an identity. And again,
Yeah.
sometimes you can have it, but then it has to change because where you're like the environment that you're in. So I hope I answered your question, but
No, you
that's
did. I did it great. Yeah, no, for sure. That's it, and that's I think what I always have felt this way for years about Tupac, and I'm going to be honest with you and the people listening. Until this documentary, it frustrated me with him
okay.
because I was like, man, you didn't like you said what Mike Tyson said. He was a good kid, and it was like, man, you could have. You had so many avenues of talent, so many things, and it's like we need you.
Yeah.
And there's so many of these stars who have died young, and you're just like, man, like it's sad that they're gone. You think about friends who like just like it's a life gone too soon, and then people think about the artwork, like the artistry, like oh they could have done more, whatever the case. If it's music, if it's movies, if it's this or that, whatever. But then it's like just his voice. If he didn't make another song, but just him speaking, just him, if he would have acted and stuff, like I don't know, but just him talking about things, it's like that's a voice that he let and we let get silenced. And I mean I mean our community, we let that get silenced. And it's a shame because it's like, man, this dude is needed. And that's why like when Tupac said he's like I go to like kids soldiers in Africa talk about Tupac, like that dude just rings with everybody. He connects with everyone. He was saying that black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, just the underdog, the downtrodden, the rebel, the fighter, the revolutionary, like that voice is quieted, and it's like, man, I don't think Tupac's the greatest rapper of all time. Like he
No.
doesn't make my number one list, right? Most influential rapper, absolutely for me,
Yeah.
no question about it. To this day, and he's been gone. In September, it will be 27 years, and still influential of his generation, influential of the generation after, and now we getting close to like the second generation after, and he still rings true, still is there, and I think that's just what's frustrating, and it's like, man, I wish he would have just slowed down, and that's what you hear what people in the doc said, but he didn't listen. He would just kept going, 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 and that chameleon side, like show your true self and
Right.
just slow down and listen. Think about the long term. We need you. So I don't know if I even answered it great, but that's just what
No, you
sticks
did.
out.
Yeah, and I think in hindsight, him being like that is what got him killed. You know what I'm saying? Like, and the incident in Vegas with Orlando Anderson, it was just like it was just that. It was him not understanding, right? Like the gang culture in LA, which is it's deep. You know what I mean? Like and generational. Like
Mm-hmm.
you need to understand that if you're going to live out there and do things out there. Like you just have to. And he and they said it in the documentary like they felt like he didn't and he attacked this dude and for whatever reason, right? And this dude was somebody, and he was a stone cold like shooter, and it's documented that he was. It's not like this is my opinion or something I've read. Like
Right, right.
it's documented, and so
Documented many times.
right. So it's like he does this, in Vegas, and they get into that altercation. He jumps on him, and because again, he wanted to be like that badass, and somebody. And he didn't even do anything to Tupac. It was like he did something to somebody, took a chain off a guy from Death Row, and they were like, "Isn't that the guy right there?" And he was like, "Where?" And he just goes off and just runs over there and starts, going off on him and stuff. Like you just can't do that stuff like to anybody, and he did because again, and they were saying it in the documentary where it was like he was trying to show like these Death Row people who most of them were gang affiliated that he was down, and you don't have to do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, but he was 25. You know what I mean? That's another thing too that was also mentioned a lot in his documentary. Like, we think about his life and like all these examples and all these memories that we all have, and he was only 25. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and that to me blows my mind sometimes to think about like just everything from like again, the shooting of the off-duty police officers, right? To him being assaulted by police officers, right? From all of that, his music, and then the him going to jail for this, like the sexual assault stuff comes out, and then the scene of him with the Detroit Red Wings jersey spitting on cameraman, like all that stuff, all of this stuff, right? Then the he gets shot in the studio, in New York in Quad Studio, like all of this stuff, man, and then the Death Row stuff, and he was only 25. You know what I mean? Like you feel like he lived a long, long life, but he lived a fast one, and those don't last too long.
No, and I think honestly, we something I a conversation I have with people is like, why do the 90s stick out? Why does 90s music stick out? And sometimes I do ask it, like, man, my bias, like, because that's what
I'm
I
very
started with.
biased. Yeah, I'm very
And I
biased.
know I am, but part of me is like, no, I think it bad. I think it's up. Like, I wouldn't put it with the 70s. Like, take my bias out. Like, 70s has amazing music. But I'm like, 90s is up there, man. Like, 90s is great. But I think in general, why it sticks out is because the 90s, it was just like a wild time. And I feel like there was wild times before in previous decades, but it caught up. And I think you look at like Tupac, you look at like Kurt Cobain. These are figures like martyred figures who still like are in the minds of people 30 something years later. And like, man, it's like their time. Cobain, it was like really he blew up like 91, and then 94 he kills himself. Tupac, that run, everything you're talking about, the movies, the music, the controversies, it's like 91 to 90. It's a 5-year gap. And in that time, yeah, it feels like he lived like 10 lives and did so
Yeah,
much. And to me, I get tired watching that. I'm like,
yeah,
oh,
right.
gee. I'm like, I can't imagine being close to you and dealing with that. And I damn sure can't imagine being you and dealing with that. I mean, I didn't know. I'll say one thing I did not know was how close. So that clip always cracked me up because I love classic TV. I love the Jeffersons. So when he gets off on the Halloween '93 shooting the two, off-duty cops, and he does that George Jefferson strut out the courtroom,
Yeah,
it was like, so it's like I said, it's stupid, it's crazy, but then you go, that's badass, like a little
yeah.
bit. And also that was funny. Like I still, whenever I see it, I do laugh when I see it too. But I'm like, man, you should have done it. I didn't realize then him getting arrested for the sexual assault was 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
I know they were that close in time like that. So that sticks out to me. Like, man, you get off on that case, and then you get set up for that other one so quickly. It's just insane.
But also too, and I'm not saying this happened because of that, but like when you beat a case like that, number one, you're pissing a lot of people off. You know what I'm saying? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're pissing off, DAs, you're pissing off judges probably, you're pissing off a lot of people,
Pissing off the government.
Right, pretty much. And just that's just you beating the case, right? Especially a case like that where it involves like police officers and them acting very inappropriate because mind you, they did all that and they were also drunk. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
so let's drunk with a gun, that's just a terrible, terrible combination. And then with power. You know what I'm saying? Like that's even worse. So, you know, not they already look bad, you know what I mean, for that situation. But if he goes to jail for shooting them, it does look like all right, like justice was served, right? But now, not only do they look that bad, now he comes and beats this case, and then he walks out like that and just kind of shows you out, like shows you up, and puts it in your face, and that's not. I mean, look, it was badass. Yes, I 100% agree, and 24-year-old Jose would have loved it. You know what I mean? Like, but looking back, it's like there's some things that you just cannot do, man. And again, I'm not saying since he walked out like that and beat that case that said they set him up for the sexual assault because again, it was a setup, that sexual assault. But
I'll
I,
say it.
say it,
I'll say it. That is. I'm not going to say that is the only thing. Like it's boom boom. I think it's a few things.
yeah,
I think it's who Tupac was. He's rising up. What he's talking about with anger. The what we saw that he was on a talk show and talking about, oh, he's promoting cop killing when that's not what he was saying.
no,
And he broke it down beautifully. Like that's not. I'm talking about police brutality and self defense. Doing all those, it's a building up. The guy who killed the cop and said he was listening to Tupac's music, Dan Quayle's vice president,
which
talking
he
about
was
it.
full of shit too. Like by the way, like
Yeah.
that guy that said that he said that because they were forcing him to say that. He was
Mm-hmm.
probably listening to his music, but he said I did it because of the song. Like he was full of shit. But
He was trying to
he's
Tupac
trying to get off
said,
of that. Yeah,
get off of death row. Like
yeah,
he trying to say whatever he could. So then you get Dan Quayle, who's vice president, saying stuff about you. So it's great that Alan Hughes showed it, and that's why if you haven't seen it, or if you have, like, remember, like, what that FBI standard of taking down the Panthers, targeting them as that's the most dangerous group, like when they were trying to just inform and educate, and that, hey, we want to take out that Messiah. That mythology of thinking still goes on today. Don't
Uh,
think because J. Edgar Hoover, I
oh
know
yeah,
you get it, but for people listening, because J. Edgar Hoover died, that they're not still doing that to this same very day.
that's the
So then,
blueprint, you know.
right, that's just the blueprint, and it was laid out there for you. So that's why we do this show, because history, past to the present, it's still going on, and guess what? It'll be your future if you don't learn from it. So hey, all those things build to we got to take him down, and boom, he does this. That's icing on the cake. That setup happened. Setup happened with Haitian Jack
Yep.
and all those things. And it's just funny how all that stuff goes down. And then he had, like he said, a group of people, and Haitian Jack gets off, this lawyer and all. Like, it was just set up so well where this girl says something. I'm not saying nothing happened to the young lady, but then the fact that Tupac gets, as soon as he walks out, what happened. And I do believe the setup for those who really know and pay attention and follow Tupac and everything, that's why the Me Too movement doesn't affect Tupac, because they know he did not do that.
Right.
And I think that setup was bound to happen. And he knew that. He knew it was down to do that. And he knew what he did was pissing him off. And I think, just like his publicist said, when he was spitting, in the Red Wing gear and the red bandana, and he's spitting at the reporters and all, it was out of fear. It was because he knew, like, they're coming for me, they're going to get me, and he kept poking that bear, and it got him. So I'm with you, like, that's why I say, like, I never will advocate like doing that. But the real emotions, like me as a kid, but also me now, was, what the hell are you doing? That's crazy. That's stupid. Part of me is like, but damn, that's kind of ballsy, and also like a little bit funny when he strutted out there like that. But
Yeah.
it came back to bite him.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but shit like that happens, and you got to deal with those consequences. And again, he was becoming really, really big, really, really fast. And again, we just mentioned how he was just 25, but he wasn't 25 at that point in time. But his star was rising and rising really quickly, because he was one of the first people, like, artists that I can remember, and like really still doing music and acting at the same time.
Right.
Like it wasn't like years later he jumped into acting, and then he starts a trend of that, right? He starts a trend of, rappers doing it, like Ice Cube started doing that like a little bit afterwards, and he was in like Higher Learning and all this stuff, and like, but what I can remember was Tupac was the first artist that I can remember, you know what I mean, like doing stuff like that. So he was moving up really, really fast. And
Yeah, it was him and Will Smith, but they're
right.
two different
Yeah.
beasts, and they're connected.
Oh yes.
They're connected.
There are probably a lot of people connected with Will Smith in that way.
Yeah, yeah.
But but yeah. So it was just very interesting, again, like you said, Jeremy, and just it's just very, I don't want to say ironic, but how that happened so quickly right after that. So who knows?
Yeah, and I want to pivot to talking about Afeni Shakur,
Yes.
and to talk about something that I had heard a little bit. I'll be honest, I'm not trying to. I heard, but I never heard in detail until this docu-series. I knew she was a Black Panther. I knew she was pregnant with Tupac while in jail with the Panther 21. Um, by the way, real quick, like, Alan, all the Panthers who spoke in this, they're like Glow, the aunt, is number one, but they're number two.
Yes.
They just brought perspective, like getting Alan Hughes getting all these Panthers to bring that connection for Afeni, but for Tupac, it was amazing to hear them talk. But hearing the fact that Afeni Shakur, on this big national trial, where everyone is gunning. They're looking to send you to jail for life. They give you up to 300 and something years. She, with not being a lawyer, doesn't have a law degree, represents herself and totally works over the narc, the
detective,
pig,
yeah,
the
yeah,
detective who like was like, undercover, and then for the Black Panthers, and then getting him and like taking it to him
yeah. She flipped them, yeah.
on the stand and winning that case, representing herself. That alone, right there, I'm like, we need to be talking about this woman all the time. Let alone the other things that she did before and after. That just blew my mind, Jose. Like hearing them talk about that.
Yeah, I love that. Like I love listening to that because again, right? I knew that story, but not in depth, and the way she approached that detective or whatever he was, because they were mentioning it how he was up there really cocky and he was feeling himself, and again, you're looking at this woman who at the time, we all know we were talking about, back in the day where it was like how men felt about women being in power and stuff like that. Like that's we all know that story, and so that's probably number one. And then number two, you're looking at an African American woman doing all of this, knowing she doesn't have a law degree, knowing that, but they had no idea how brilliant that she was, and she would ask him questions like, yeah, when you were doing whatever it was he was doing, were you a detective or were you a Black Panther? And like she asked him like 6 or 7 more questions like that with the same like reference to, are you a detective or were you a Black Panther? And he was having a very tough time answering that like that. And again, it just showed everyone, it showed the jury, it showed people in the audience, like she knew what she was doing. You know what I mean? Like she was up there and it was all calculated and she knew exactly how to approach him. It was just an amazing story when they were talking it, and it was just like, man, like that's one of those things I wish I was like there to see, in history, I guess. I mean, I know that's not like a huge historical event, but to me it is, because again, like
Yeah, it
not
is.
not only was the government, like their main focus was to bring down the Black Panther. So now you have, this is not like you're just like suing somebody like and they have a really good attorney. This is the United States government. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
purposely attacking this group of individuals and unlimited resources. They gave the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover like, do whatever it is you have to do, and they absolutely did. Um, and she still got up there and handled her business and represented her stuff in a way that probably has never been done before and ever since. So I agree. I think that itself, nothing else. If she does nothing else, I think that alone, like judiciously, has to be talked about more. Like just
Mm-hmm.
an example. But I think honestly, they probably don't want to because they don't want to give other people ideas to do the same thing who could probably do the same exact thing as well. But
Yeah,
it's an incredible thing that she did, and my hat's definitely my hat goes off to her for sure.
and it just was something to see when you're watching them talk about all those the Panthers who uh, I forget the Panther who was the one who was over. He was a war hero and came and started
Blood,
teaching.
no, not
Yeah,
blood. Yeah, was it Blood Panther or something like that? The older guy with the bald head.
I was talking about the guy who was the war hero. He had like a medal, like a Purple Heart or something. He had like all these like Medal of Honor, and then he
Yeah.
started teaching him how
Yes,
like
yes,
to
yes,
defend
yes,
himself. I think he
yes.
was Tupac's godfather. Tupac had a few godfathers, but he was one of his godfathers. And it to me was big on seeing like that's the problem, right? Like you how it's been systemically, and people don't want to see it. And Alan Hughes was doing it subtly, but also in your face. Of this is a plot to tear down the black family, tear down the black man. But like you go over, you train him to go fight your war, and then when he comes back, you treat him like garbage. And then when he uses the training that you gave him
Right.
to help better himself, then you want to tear him down for it. and you can't win either way. You know, by just existing, you lose. Trying to be nice, you lose. And then when you say you fight back like so many white men do, then you lose that way. Then you're a threat, you're dangerous, you're scary, you're all these things. And it's like that's the battle that black men have. And then you see also, like, to the flip side, what Afeni went through, the battle that black women have. And the fact that she's doing so much, and those brothers really let her down in a way.
Yeah.
And she, you know, not only got herself exonerated, but raising money, bringing attention to the cause to kind of raise money for the other members who were on trial for the Panther 21. But then these guys, and it showed, I mean, they had to have accountability because they did let the divide and conquer happen too. They were a part of it, but like splitting up the money. Where's the money go? Does it go here? Does it go there? And then people, you know, who's a help? Is it helping Huey Newton in California and the Panthers in New York for the Panther 21? They're upset with Afeni when not realizing all the amazing work this woman has done. And the thing is, it's like these are issues. It's like, oh, that was in the early 70s. Yeah, that's when it happened. It was like that before, and we're still battling that now, where we got to give respect to our women and show them, like, hey, like, how strong, how powerful, how beautiful they are. And it's not, instead of being threatened by it, embrace it, learn from it, and show it that appreciation and love that it deserves.
Right. We got to be real to our women, to heal our women. If not, we'll have a race of babies that'll hate the ladies. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he was spot on. You know what I'm saying? Like, and but again, like, it's a system that's involved, and the system knows exactly what it's doing, and they know how to attack individuals and all of that stuff, man. But no, to just to kind of like touch base again on what she did was, you know, in the courtroom and all that stuff, and the impact that it should be having, man. It's just like you don't even hear about it. You know what I mean? Like, you don't even hear at all. Like, and again, like, you have to really be a fan and really be a fan, like, and not only a fan of him, but like a fan of history, and like, you know, that Black Power, that Black Panther movement. I loved it. Like, I love reading up on it. I've watched so many documentaries on it. I know, Jeremy, you know a lot about that, and it's just the flip side of it is like what this government did to them, right? And that, it's really, like, we can do another episode on that, but you know, it's really scary, to be honest with you, and very unfortunate. But even all of that, she rose through all of that and did an amazing job. So again, like, she's a person that, you know, we talk about a lot. We probably done that. We probably talked about this on this show for a couple times, where it's like, you know, some people in history where you want to just sit down and have dinner with, right? And, you know, for me, it's like, quickly I go to like Roberto Clemente, like people like that, and she made the list for me. You know, she's 100% made the list for me, because again, like, just to sit there and like pick her brain on just that, I'd have been very satisfied. But now we're going to add a bunch of other stuff that she did. She was an extraordinary woman.
And I think, to kind of segue into it, what this movie did was also, I think, it should be used in a lot of places. And I know where where I first met you, where we worked at, when you talk about things from mental health and addiction, and the stigma that goes with those things, stigma that goes with addiction. And you saw this was a great woman,
Yeah,
who did so many great things. But you see what she went through when she's in that women detention. She spent, like, during that trial, those 2 years, she was in that women detention center, going through that, pregnant, getting put down, not being embraced. Her life is threatened. What's going to happen to her unborn child? And then to go and have to defend herself with the nation watching and the government trying to tear you down, and you survive that, and then you get out and you get abandoned by the brothers you have been in this fight with, and you have no money, no resources, no anything, and now you have this son, and you're torn up emotionally, spiritually, mentally. Yeah, and are we further advanced nowadays where it's more in the lexicon of talking about it as a disease? Yes. Are we still far away where, as far as we just want to put a stigma on and criminalize and demonize people who battle addiction? We still have that. But then you go back to the 70s, yes, you're going to self medicate. And that's what those Panthers were saying.
Yep.
Their lives were put on the line, they were burned out, they were scared, they were paranoid, and rightfully so to be paranoid. They had lost a lot, saw people die, being shot at, losing anything, everything, losing opportunities. You're going to self medicate. It's easy to say, well, what about in the 70s?
Mm.
Therapy? What was that? And then in the black community, talk about therapy, which we still battle now. What were they going to do?
Right.
But you see, and I think that's where, to combine the two of them, Tupac, even as a young man, saw that. He was frustrated when his mom was going through, battling the addiction. It hurt him. He needed his mom. He missed her, and he has a right to have that pain. I'm not taking that pain away from him or anybody. But then it's on the flip side. I think he knew this is my mom. This is a good woman. This is a great woman who did a lot, and she's been through a lot, and she's been through a lot of pain. And him having to carry all those things inside, the rage, the anger toward her, but the love, the appreciation, and the empathy, it's a lot for anyone to carry, let alone a young man. And then trying to grow up to become a man. And I think this movie shows. I'm not saying that there's not other movies, but just like, man, you want to demonize or put that stigma on battling that trauma, on battling addiction. But she's an example of right there where you understand absolutely you're going to self medicate. And it's not so much, the addiction is what society does to people to want to have them go look for that drug as a solution. The drug is, say, a solution to the pain, it's a solution
It's a
to the
symptom,
sorrow.
man.
You know what I mean? And that's what like Afeni Shakur went through, and that's what this movie showed so well, in my opinion.
Oof, man, you got me ready to go, man. Like, no, I'm with you. You know, I'm with you with that, and even just think about this, right? Not only are they battling all of that, and I'm talking about they, like, like the Black Panther movement, like all of them involved in that, like they're dealing with all of this, right? Everything that you just mentioned, right? You know, at this point in time in this country, like drugs are really, really like starting to really take off. But even the ones who weren't even in this country, who were like shipped away to Vietnam and stuff like that, what happened out there? Like they were all like coming home with drug addictions, right? Like heroin
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that was prominent, like in the Vietnam War. And again, there was one of the guys, like the Blood Panther, whatever his name was, the older gentleman who talked about that. Like he was like, "Yeah, I was out there in Vietnam," and he was like, "My drug of choice was heroin." And when they came home as addicts, like and which is another scary thing. You know what I'm saying? So not only do you put these men in a situation of war, so they're coming home with PTSD, severe PTSD, right? And then they're coming home addicted to a drug, and then they come to the country that they were just battling their lives for, giving up who God knows what, right? Body parts, but more important, like not more importantly, but also say do you survive, physically survive all of that, mentally, you're coming home a totally different person, right? From the stuff that they saw over there. And now you come into a country that doesn't even give a shit about you, right? Like you come home as a person of color, and it doesn't even matter everything you literally just sacrifice your life, even though you come home alive, but you come home in one piece. Mentally, you're never going to be the same again, and then we wonder why where they come home and they again self-medicating and things like that. Like it's a scary cycle, that happens to a lot of these men and women um in this time. You know what I'm saying? Like so and again to kind of like tie it back to Afeni Shakur, well, to go and do everything that she was doing in the midst of all of that, it to me is again, we talked about what she did in court and all that. That's one amazing story. This is like just as in my book, just as amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know when we jumped on here, Jeremy, you were congratulating me in my situation, right? Of May 14th is my anniversary. I had 8 years sober. May 14th, which was yesterday when we recorded this, was Sunday. So for me to even think about like someone like for me 8 years ago going to court and representing, like there's no way like I was going to be able to do that right in that time of my life. And it, it's amazing to think about her doing all of that and still like not only battling that but having a child that she had to deal with and obviously take care of, right? Like you got to deal with
Yeah,
your
yeah,
kids and
yeah.
and just battling everything that she battled and to still come out of all of that an amazing woman is just it's mind blowing to me, man. Like this again, like I hold her in such high regards now after watching this. And again, I knew some of the story. I knew like I guess like surface level stuff. You know what I mean? Like I knew what happened. I didn't know why. You know what I mean? Like, but what this docu series showed me was like the why to the what. And it's just it blew my mind for sure.
She is, and I can't get her out of my mind since
Right,
I've watched
right,
this.
right.
Like, just like, wow. And I'll say for me, and it doesn't mean any. It's not like a woe is me. I feel guilty because she was around.
Right.
Another, Dear Mama came out what 94 or something like that,
Yeah, something like that.
95, and then I remember seeing her a lot after Tupac's death.
Yeah.
And to me, that was Tupac's mom. And I was just like, oh man, it's tough to see Tupac. Same way I looked at like Biggie's mom, and they would, you would see them together at like music awards and stuff. Say, oh, that's Miss Wallace, like
Yeah.
that's Miss Afeni. Like, and I don't know these ladies personally, but that's how I just was like, oh man, just bring up that sadness. Where I really should have been like saluting you and being
Right,
like,
right,
damn. And I was saluting her as a mom and like a mom who lost her son, but like saluting her as just a warrior,
right.
and that's a soldier. And you don't just have to go and fight for the U.S. Army to be a soldier. In my mind, that woman was a soldier. Like Tupac said, she's a soldier. If she was a soldier, she was fighting. She sacrificed for her country. She fought for her country in so many ways that I'll never understand. I'll never know, and I feel bad about that. I wish I would have been able to give her flowers from far away while she was alive.
Yeah, not only did she fought for her country, like I think more importantly, she fought and put up an amazing fight for her race. You know what I'm saying? For like her gender, like what she was doing for women. Like again, another piece of this that should be talked about more. You know what I'm saying? Like her, and then if you think about like this Black Panther movement and everything like that, show me another woman that was as prominent, you know what I'm saying, in that. Like there wasn't too many. Like there was a couple there, but she was in the middle of all these like strong, powerful men. She was right in the middle of all of that. You know what I'm saying? Like and on her 2 feet, like handling that. So um
No, you're right. I say a lot of times I've had this conversation. I'm not here to offend anybody, but it's like, yes, you fought for your country. You joined the military. I don't take that away. I respect
right,
that,
right, right.
but that's not the only way you fight for your country. And I think a lot of times people, and I'll be real. I've had this conversation with people who are like vets, and they say I fought for my country, and I don't ever take away from them. And I say, no, absolutely you did. But in my way, I fight for my country too. I fight for people too. So you're not going to tear me down either. And so that's the only reason why I say it like that, because there's fighting in the military, and I respect that. But then there's fighting domestically. There's fighting at home with these issues that are affecting the country, that are affecting the majority of people. Affect that class warfare, the race warfare that's going on. And she was in the front lines fighting that all the time. And that's fighting for your country. Because guess what? As Bill Russell said, like, I don't have to back that. I'm going to butcher the quote, but I don't have to apologize or make you feel comfortable for my birthright. She's from here. I'm from here. You're from here. We got as much right to everything as people of all races, of white, whatever. So I don't have to apologize and make you feel comfortable for my birthright. And Afeni Shakur was a great example. And then it went into Tupac. And now were they perfect with it? Absolutely not. But who is? None of us are. But they fought for, hey, like, this is my, y'all brought us here. This is my birthright. And I'm not going to be subservient or bow down to you in that way.
And that takes a strong individual to stand on that. Like, we can talk about that. A lot of people talk about that, and talk a lot of good shit, and but to stand on it and put your life on that, those are different individuals, and we've had a handful of those in history. But and she's one of them. It's like they both, I think they're both that can be put up there with that. So I just think he is obviously put up with that because he had the spotlight on him, and and he used that platform to his benefit, right? And but the stuff that he was talking about, where did he learn it from? And he would say it. He learned this from his mother. Like, his mom taught him all of this stuff. And again, she wasn't in the limelight, but she was just as important, if not, man, like even more important to what he was doing. So no, I'm glad. And with this documentary, I'm glad Alan used it, gave her flowers, right? Like, I'm glad her sister was on here. Her sister Glow was on here, like speaking to her about her the way that she was, right? I'm glad that those, like those old school, like Black Panther guys were on here talking about her, giving her flowers the way she deserved to have them. Even his friends were talking about her, how strong she was when all of this went down in Vegas and he was in the hospital and all that. Like, how she would come out and be like, "Look, you can't cry." Like Snoop Dogg was telling the story, like he was all down and out, obviously, because I think a couple of days before the shooting, they got into a little argument, whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
he was going in there to see him, and she was like, "You got to change like your attitude right now. You look all sad and down." She's like, "Stand up, go in there like you normally do, all happy and positive." And he said, he did go in there like that. He apologized for whatever it was while he was laying in the hospital bed, and but that's the type of woman she was. She could have been there crying, getting all this attention, and she wasn't. She was trying to be strong and then have others as well come in and be strong for her son. And again, that just speaks to the type of individual she was.
Nah, for sure. For sure. Something that really I did hear some people talk about, but and this is going to be a tough question to answer, Jose. So sorry, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but what do you think Tupac's life and legacy is if Death Row doesn't get in the picture?
Oof. I don't see. I will say this, right? Like, his affiliation, right, with Death Row, 100% elevated him, right? Like, it put him in a position to work with a producer like Dr. Dre, right? Who, you talked about California Love, you talk about all these songs that, yeah, we can talk Dear Mama, we can talk Keep Your Head Up, we can talk, you know, I Get Around. Like, those are all great songs. But when you first think about, for a lot of people, when you first think about Tupac, is this like Death Row era, right? Like him blowing up, like America's Most Wanted, like all of these amazing songs that he has. Like, I think, him joining Death Row, and even Tyson said it too, like, which I thought was a pretty strong statement, where he was like, no, I thought him joining Death Row was good for him. You know what I mean? Like, these dudes were going to elevate him, and they did. They 100% did. So do I think him making that decision was wrong? I know that's not the question, but like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think he did what he needed to do, right? But so I don't know. Like, when it comes to his music, I still think he makes great music, right? Like, I think that's a given. I don't know if it's as popular as it is now. Um, or still to this day. Like whatever music he comes out with, I think the Death Row stuff is just it's timeless. You know what I'm saying? Like it's never going away. I know you were about to jump in, but
No. I was
all
I'm
right.
just
So
listening. Yeah.
yeah, so I think that for me that's a piece of it, right? But another piece is he's probably still alive. You know what I'm saying? Like that is the most important part of this all. And I think and I mean he like in Tupac, I think he loves this new generation that's coming, right? Like with with them like with the protests and them being so vocal and good and bad, right? Like let's call it for what it is. But I think he loves his generation. I think he's a powerful, impactful individual for this new generation. You know, I think acting I think it becomes more a bigger part than that because it talked about it in episode 5 how he was trying to leave Death Row and he wanted his masters and stuff. I didn't know that. You know what I mean? Like I did not. I knew him and Suge were having like some issues and stuff, but I didn't know he wanted to leave and he wanted all his masters. And we all know in history music, like to try to get your masters is a big deal, and a lot of things happen to artists when they try to do that. And again, like it's another scary conversation to have. But um, so I know I'm a little long winded here, but I just
No.
I think his legacy is still a very powerful one, but I don't think it's as strong as if he doesn't join Death Row ever. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he's going to have classic songs. That's all of that's happened. I just think, but I think his stuff is timeless. What he did with Dre and everyone else in Death Row, and then I think he's still doing a lot of other things. I think music. I think he would have faded away from music earlier than a lot of us would have thought.
Yeah. I
I think
definitely
that.
agree with that. I think like you said, I agree. Like the most important thing, I think maybe he's alive, and it's hard to say because he would have been in jail longer.
Yeah.
Something that I don't think he should have been in jail for. I'll
Right.
be honest. But then I think that's more time to reflect. And sadly, like I hate to say it, but maybe he slows down a little bit because he's in. I don't think you had done. I forget how much, like 4 years, 4.5 years. I think someone's getting him out eventually, or he's big enough. Someone's bringing in a lawyer to help him get out. Like I don't think he's spending the whole time in jail, in my opinion. But I think he has a little more time to kind of slow down and settle down than he gets out really quick, and then he's just shows like, "Let's you ready?" And then it's like, "Yeah," and then they just rev it up, and they're
Yeah.
just going. I think for his legacy, good and bad, the death row thing is what people go to first. That
Right.
era is what people look at. That's why I like this docu. I hope this, you never know, can kind of impact and change that. And I'm not going to say that a lot of times I don't go there because, like we've been saying, and you said so many, Tupac versus Biggie, East Coast, West Coast, this and that. Like it's the first thing you mention if you talk about '90s music, you talk about hip hop growing, you go East Coast, West Coast beef. Like it's just
Yeah.
like his legacy is very different. Not saying his light is diminished, but like it's very. I agree, music stops, and I think he goes into movies more. I think there's part of me think there's a Tupac Denzel collaboration down the road. Like
Yeah.
those two just would have met up at some point and done a movie, or Tupac and Spike would have done something maybe at one point. Like I think acting, I say like an Oscar in his like
Yeah.
future. Um, I think that's where he, as great of an artist as he is, when I watch the movies he's in, like from Above the Rim to Juice, like I'm blown away with this dude. Like just he's captivating, and I just think it's a completely different legacy in a lot of ways, but definitely just keeping it to music if he doesn't sign with Death Row.
Yeah. I'm going to give you like a sports analogy to that, right? Because again, like this is bigger than the game, and that's what we do here. And
Yeah,
I'm going to say it's like Barry Bonds if he doesn't take roids. You know what I'm saying?
no,
Like I think
that's really good. That's really
I
good.
I think it's still a really great career. It's just not as talked about as much because again, like he's flying under the radar with 35 home runs a year. You know what I'm saying? Like compared to
That's
like
really good.
these guys hitting 40, 50, 60. You know, I think it's something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like where he's very consistent and then just kind of like just goes away without. Now, I do think like you mentioned, and that was a good point there. I mean, like he's in jail a little longer, he reflects a little more, and I think the music that comes out from that, it's more of like that, you know, like social justice and stuff like that. I think he makes more songs that way. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Like I think it's less party stuff like that, but I don't know if he sells as many records, right? I don't know if that, especially at that point in time that you're talking now, like you know, like Bad Boy and all of that stuff. And but now look at the legacies that affects there, even there. You know what I'm saying? Like now we have Biggie that lives longer, you know, whatever, and all of that stuff. Like so that career is completely different. Hip hop is completely different. You know what I'm saying? And but because now he's like if you're coming out with because at that time it was all like now gangster rap is like heavy, heavy, heavy. But the shift comes in like with Bad Boy and Diddy and Mace and all that party stuff and getting dressed up and you know all of that comes now he's going to have to battle that and I don't think he's going to sell as many records but I just think his legacy is quietly just continues on and just becomes very very solid you know so that's kind of like where I was thinking where you were talking just now Jeremy.
No, I think it's a great comparison. The Barry, that's really good, man. That Barry Bonds career, I like that. But like you said, this is bigger than the game, and so I'm going to throw a sports comparison out at you, or a sports question out at you. Um, Tupac dies September of '96. A few months earlier, the NBA draft, the Sixers draft this guard from Georgetown, Allen Iverson,
Hmm.
first overall. It's amazing to me because we both, me and you, and a lot of people from Philadelphia and across the country, we saw this guy grow and he was exciting. And I knew he was an exciting athlete, a controversial athlete. He's one of the most important athletes of all time,
Yes.
like AI. Does Allen Iverson happen without Tupac Shakur? In the cultural stuff, not the
Right, right,
ball
right, right,
player.
right. Uh, I think so, man. I think AI was a different dude. You know what I mean? Like, and it was mentioned in this docu series, and how like people talked about Tupac, and he was like, you know, a lot of them said like this was just a different motherfucker. Like that's exactly how they put it. I think Allen Iverson is in that was like cut from that cloth as well. I think you know you put AI 10 years later, I think it still happens. You know what I'm saying? Like I think just he maybe he didn't know, but he understood like the culture. You know what I'm saying? Like he understood like the impact he had on kids and just the generation as a whole. And the AI did. He had a tremendous impact on the entire generation. You know, and so I think yes, I do. Like not to again not to get like super into it, but I definitely do. I think AI is happening no matter what. You know, which is still like an incredible thing because we were all a part of that. What do you
No,
think, Jeremy?
I just wondered because it's like that's so close in
Yeah.
the time frame, and they were doing the same thing in a way,
Yep.
honestly, and they were being themselves. They were being authentic, being original on Madison Avenue, um, and it had older white guys and older black guys scared. Both of them had them both scared, and the young kid had made me more scared because young black kids, young white kids, young Hispanic, Asian were following them. And I think to look at the time frame, sometimes you don't think about it like man, like Tupac's run, AI's run, they kind of go like a little bit of parallel. Like when Tupac died, AI kind of in a way culturally, he's one of the guys who helps carry that mantle.
Yeah. Yeah, he is.
And it's just like I don't know if we look at that comparison a lot of times, and AI went through a lot of stuff so that a lot of people
Very similar. Yeah.
didn't have to go through. I look at like these podcasts, I look at like all the smoke with Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes, and they're high throughout the whole show doing this. And I don't not, hey, it's cool. I'm like, you don't have that without AI. LeBron with all the tattoos, like AI, that was the biggest deal when he was getting tattoos, and it was like no one had them. And now I remember the conversations like that's bad for this, bad for that. Like just doing a rap album, doing all these different things. Um, it just is mind blowing to me. So I do agree with you. I think AI is in that elk where he was just authentic. He was a different cat in so many ways. But I can't help. I would want to ask AI. Who
Yeah.
knows? I mean, he's from Hampton, but how much did Tupac influence him in being himself
Right.
on that
I was
stage?
I was thinking that too when you were talking. I was like, man, that would be like a great question to ask because if you think about it, let's say like I can't think of anyone in that era that was like had a bunch of tattoos other than Tupac, right? Like, that I'm just trying to think, man, like that was like really flaunting them and like showing them off and stuff like that, and no shirt on and all
Off
this
the dome,
stuff.
it's hard to think of somebody. Yeah.
Right, right. And then I just think AI. I don't know if that influenced AI to like kind of do the same thing, because I feel like he's the next one that I first think about of like not caring and like really being tatted up and just started that whole whatever you want to call it revolution or whatever of like to what it is today, and it's just such a huge market, and folks again tattoos on their face, like what I'm saying, like it's just these two are very influential in that, and so maybe that can be a piece of it, but yeah, like I think AI is going to be AI.
Well, final question for me that I'm gonna throw out to you about Tupac. How do you feel about him after watching this docu series, and has your perspective on him changed, better or worse, or both?
No, it didn't get worse, not even a little bit. I can guarantee you that. And I alluded to this a little earlier, Jeremy. Like I, a lot of his music I loved. You know what I mean? Like I, Shed So Many Tears is one of my favorite songs of all time. Any artist, and I had a friend of mine pass away around that time, and it was just I was just playing that all the time. It's just it's a deep ass song, right? And so but in saying that, like I was talking about earlier, like and you said it too, Jeremy. Like I'm not. I know people that's like, who's the best hip hop artist of all time? Oh, Tupac. Like I don't go there, and but saying like watching this, and this is not like recency bias or nothing like that. Like I now have such a better one understanding of his music, right? I 100% do, and then like now it just even more like of a better appreciation for it. Now I'm still not telling you, yeah, I think he's the best rapper of all time. I'm not, but he's definitely like climbed up my list, and only because again, like I know the substance of his music. And a lot of these dudes, like these songs that they write, are full of shit anyway. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think for me to know so much more of his backstory than what I knew before, and not only his backstory, but the backstory of his mother, and then it's just like a song like Dear Mama. It's like, why was that so important? It was just like, oh, because of all of this. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's just to me, he's definitely because it's just, and you said it, and I think you said it perfectly. Like he's like the most influential rapper of all time, and I didn't even know if I believed that at first, but today I am 100%. I 100% do. So for me, that definitely get worse. It got my appreciation for him got much heightened, and yeah, I think he's one of the most influential people in American history. You know what I'm saying? Like hands down. So what about you, Jeremy? I think I know this answer, but I want the rest of the audience to know.
Yeah, it. Well, for one, "Dear Mama" is not my favorite Tupac song, but I think I'll be honest. Maybe it's gonna people be like, "What? That's bad." It's this right here hit me where I'm like, it's not my favorite, but it's the best song Tupac ever did. Like, if
Okay.
that makes any sense. Like, I
No,
think
no, no.
that's
I get
like
it.
the most important song maybe he did, slash the best song. It's like I said, not my favorite song. It's a great one. Like I think it's an awesome song, but like this kind of like wrapped it up like in a watching this docu-series, which is maybe a shame, but it took that for me to like sit there and be like, yeah, that's an amazing song. Like that's one of like the best songs period of all time, and it's his best song, and it's a legacy defining type song, Dear Mama. So that hit came out from this. I think for me, it's something that fascinates me with people, not just in sports, not just celebrities, people walking, everyday life, people that are in my circle or in your circle, is there's that it factor with people where you don't have, you can try to put words on it, but you don't really have the word where it's like this guy, this woman, they're just different. They got something special about them. And we see a big part of that was his mom, and like it's genetics and it's generational trauma and all those things affected him. But this dude was just different. And hearing how people have to, and this isn't the first, now this I've been hearing for the past 27 years, how he was just a different dude, and how he just, people were like, you can't describe him. And like when he blew through your life, it was like a tornado, a hurricane, a rainbow, like the sun was shining, but all that at one time. And I think that is something that just amazes me, which is just, is it always like, is it genetics or is it nature versus nurture? And it's like, man, he's something like it's both, and you don't know which one wins out more.
Yeah.
Because people can go through that. He's not the first child of someone who's an addict. He's not the other Panthers had children come after him, but they're not like him.
Yeah.
He's a different dude. And that to me is what sticks out, which is just, and I think you look at like a Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix, so many artists who died young, and we all had like the 27 Club and all that stuff. And even if you look in sports, if you look in movies, James Dean, Marilyn Monroe, I think he's the most interesting of them all, and the most captivating of them all. Where, like I said at the beginning, Afeni needs her own classes about her, but there's so many classes at Harvard, Ivy League, to another school, just about Tupac. And to me, it's like you could do a whole curriculum and then some on him. He could be like a major. I majored in Tupac. And I feel like you still wouldn't know everything. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I majored in Tupac. Oh, you must be an expert. And then it's like there's a bunch of more stories that come out, or more contradictions, or more, man, he was this, he was that. Like, I don't know. I just feel like there's none of them are as interesting or as captivating as him, of those people who was like what could have been. It's like he's number one to me, where it's like, man, that was just like a bright like orbit that we had for only 25 years. But man, he got every ounce of those 25 years in his lifetime.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree with that. And yeah, it was just really cool. And I felt very fortunate watching this, like, and learning all of this. So I wanted to ask you, Jeremy, before we wrap up, I definitely had to ask you this, but where do you rank this documentary compared to like some of the others we always talk about? OJ, Made in America. We talk about, so many other documentaries. Where do you put this one at?
I could be recency bias, but I mean it's a 2-man race with this and OJ Made in America. And I feel like they both did the same kind of thing.
Yes, they did.
Where they just had you feeling so many emotions and so much. Like I said, and for people listening, I could change my mind. So like, don't hold me to it. But for the recent documentaries, right, and docuseries, this could be number one.
Yeah, no, like, I'm with you. Go ahead. I'll let you finish.
Oh no, it's just I know I've been long winded this episode because I just had so much on one, so I apologize. But it's just like this has me evaluating myself. Like none of these topics are things that I don't think about. You know, my relationship with my mother, how I look at my mom, how I look at my grandmothers who are no longer here, my godmom who's no longer here, my aunts and their relationship with their kids, and you know, I think about that. But Jose, this docuseries has me really reflecting and evaluating myself and how I operate as a son, as a person, as a black man in a lot of ways. And it's been on my mind. And I don't know. It's a good thing, but I can't get it out of the front of my mind right now. And I think OJ had that effect, that docuseries, but this is an even deeper, more personal one.
Right.
So, like I said, it could be recency bias. Ask me in a few months, and I might can go the other way. But right now, it's number one.
Yeah, it's number one to me, and I just want to say this for the listeners, like we all know how Jeremy feels about OJ Made in America. Like, and check the archives. We did an episode, a recap
Check
on.
them.
We did a recap on Made in America with OJ and all that, we know how powerful and impactful that was. But I'm right there with you. Like, as great as that was, I can't relate to living in like Beverly Hills and being a professional football player and all of this stuff. And I can't relate to being a rapper either, but I can relate to everything that he was talking about, like all his like what was in his music, all the struggles he went through, well, most of the struggles he went through. I'll say it like that, and how he felt about society and like all of that. Like I can 100 relate to that, 100% relate to that, and you mentioned you kind of went down a list earlier, and I think that was so great. Like what this documentary hit. OJ Made in America hit a lot of stuff too. Don't get me wrong, but this documentary hit home for me on so many different levels. Right? You talked about like the effects of like addiction, mental health, like society issues, like like class and things like that. Like all of that, like and OJ Made in America hit on a couple of those too. Don't get me wrong, but like this just it was just one perfect like circle on how like a cycle on how like it would just consistently hit on all of those things. It wasn't just like a one shot like what OJ Made in America. I think like it would talk about class, but it wasn't continuous. Like it was just like in one of these episodes. I felt like with Dear Mama, it was like all of this stuff it talked about. It was just like recycled throughout. And it's funny because I finished this like I think it was yesterday I told you, or even I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
whenever I finished it, and
I think earlier today, right?
right, and it just coincided with like in this state I'm in of reflection, and again and like being like it was my anniversary like in sobriety on the 14th, May 14th, and like with that, and I'm already in that state of mind of reflection, and then this comes in, and I'm like wrapping all this up, and it just put me, like you said, it just put me in a different mindset of like, man, like I'm grateful I survived all of that. You know what I'm saying? Like it put me
Yeah.
in that mindset where it's like a lot of people do not. You know what I mean? And I'm just putting the like sobriety and addiction to the side. I mean, just growing up the way we grew up. But I'll keep it to me like the way I grew up and where I grew up and how rough it was and all the stuff that he was talking about in songs, all the stuff that they were talking about, in the documentary. And it's just like to sit back sometimes and go, wow, like I survived all of that. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just because some of my friends didn't. You know what I'm saying? Like and that put it in a lot of, like big time perspective, especially this the last episode. And again, like if you have not watched this, like this last episode is one of the best things I've seen in like that film, whatever you want to call it, like in a long, long time. Like it literally, I was in tears. Like it just blew my mind. And Jeremy set me up for it, and I was like, yeah, whatever. And then I was done. You know what I mean? Like so, if you haven't watched it, please sit down, take some time out of your day, it's a rainy Saturday, just sit back, grab a grub, and trust me, you'll thank us later.
No, and that was well said, man. And we've had conversations off air about what you just shared, and I appreciate. It takes courage, it takes vulnerability to share what you shared, and I'm proud of you hitting 8 years, and
Thank
and
you,
so
man.
I'm thankful that you shared that. And that's I'm gonna leave it at that. That's all I got to say on it because this one I'm still reflecting and thinking about a lot of stuff, and I'm just grateful that we have this platform
Right.
to talk about this kind of stuff. And this is, we're bigger than the game, and the game is sports, but this is life we're talking about, and these are issues that still affect us. And let's be real, they're always going to affect us as long as we're breathing. And I'm just glad that I got you to do this show with me and to talk about this. And I'm grateful for Alan Hughes. I'm grateful for Tupac's family, everyone involved who did this because this is needed. And I'm going to be an advocate to talk about Afeni Shakur. And hey, you should learn more about her. Go read the book that Jasmine Guy wrote. Go watch this docuseries. Go learn about the Black Panthers and really learn about them. Go learn about the Panther 21 trial and go watch this. Go listen to Tupac's music and don't just listen to, hit him up or something. Listen to the lyrics. Listen to what's going on. But he did hit him up. Hey, think about what this guy was going through, the paranoia, the mental health. He was not being able to trust nobody, the anger he had. Think about it and all those things. Then just it was a funny song or he got a good diss track. Look at it harder and deeper. Like I don't know. I'm just I'm grateful that I watched it, and I'm grateful that you
Right.
watched it too. But sometimes, man, you think like, well, this will be all right. You can't mess this up, but we'll be good. And I'm glad I was proven wrong.
Yeah, because we've been talking like there's been some duds. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Last since the pandemic, but this definitely was not. I know you mentioned earlier. I don't know if it was Saturday when you were over here, but like this has been a good year. You know what I mean for some documentaries. So but definitely check this out. So what we want you to do is obviously we'll you'll be listening to this episode. We'll be posting on social media on Twitter and Instagram. You can find us at Bigger Game Pod on both platforms, Twitter and Instagram. You can reach out to us. Um, on YouTube at Bigger Than a Game podcast with Jeremy Jose. But let us know what you think. Let us know. You can let us know again when we post the episode, or you can, shoot us a DM and let us know what you think about any of the episodes. If you want to talk about the documentary series as a whole, just hit us up, man. We're very curious to see what others think about this and kind of like where after watching this, where you were at when it comes to the artist, the individual, Afeni Shakur. But yeah, definitely do that, and we'll be more than interested to have that conversation with you.
so for the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Jose Ruiz, I'm Jeremy Dove. Thank you guys for listening to Bigger Than the Game with Jeremy and Jose.
Peace.